welcome everyone. Welcome. You are on the Energy Democracy Project briefing call. My name is Crystal Huang. I am the coordinator of the Energy Democracy Project and will be your MC for the hour. So a few technical things here. This call is being recorded and this is an informational call. We look forward to discussing with you at the Q&A session. The funder briefing is not a pitch space. Nothing here is being attributed to press or individuals. So please use the chat for questions when you think of any. And we have Adam Flint from the New York Energy Democracy Alliance in the background helping with tech. And the overview of today's call is to go a little deeper into Energy Democracy Project, learn about the project and the energy democracy movement, how this work connects with the work advancing climate solutions, renewable energy, and racial justice. We'll be hearing from 6 affiliated organizations in the energy democracy frontlines. The COVID-19 pandemic and the movement for racial justice have really underscored the urgency and the need to transform American economic and social systems to address and advance racial and economic justice. And to help guide us in this conversation and new relationship here, let's get a sense of how many of you have heard of energy democracy and use this term regularly. So I'm going to launch a poll here. Or maybe you already have it in front of you. Should I relaunch it?
Yeah, we have it.
Oh, great. And thank you for responding to the poll. We will, and for those who haven't, please do so. And I will share with you all on what we have. Seems like 50% of people are pretty familiar. And thank you for participating. It's really important to see where folks are on this concept of energy democracy and to really better understand the impact of energy democracy and the value of the Energy Democracy Project. We need to take a first look at the historical context in which we find ourselves today. And I'll turn it over to Al to set the context, and then I will share how the Energy Democracy Project fits in and how we got started.
Thank you, Crystal. Welcome everybody. I'm Al Weinrub with the Local Clean Energy Alliance based in Oakland, California. I just wanted to set the stage here a little bit. When we talk about energy democracy, we're not talking about an endpoint. We're really talking about a struggle over who makes decisions about energy. As we know, energy is really vital to all life activity, but currently it's controlled by a very narrow sector of people and interests, corporate interests, for whom energy is really the source of their economic and political power. So control of energy is really, it's really about power. It's about all other forms of power as well. And so from that light, the notion of democratizing energy is much more than just a fight to transition to renewable energy. It's more than a switch in energy technology. It's really about power, political and economic power. And it's about seeing energy as a resource, as a human right, as really a form of human empowerment. So energy democracy is really very broadly based. It's really about a whole new energy paradigm, a way of looking at energy in relationship to our ecosystem in a different way, in a way that conveys, the needs of environmental justice. It's a way of looking at energy and how it relates to our economy in a different way. Instead of being able to reinforce the current system of extraction and exploitation, it's really about furthering economic justice. And it's also looking at energy in relationship to social empowerment and the role that it has played in racializing the impacts of fossil fuel energy. So it's really about communities taking control and ownership of energy resources in a way that we haven't seen before. And with this must be led by communities of color who have been most impacted by the fossil fuel economy of the recent century. And so that equity really has to be at the center of this struggle. And we see this playing out in our communities across the country where people are struggling in one way or another to get that control. It happens with people who are trying to build solar in their communities so that low-income people have access to it. It's about creating new kinds of energy cooperatives. It's about opposing, rate hikes and power shutoffs and moratoriums on energy, and fighting for moratoriums amidst COVID, to not have energy shut off. It's about democratizing rural cooperatives that exist across the country. It's about basically the fight against the private utilities who have continued to dominate the system. It's about fighting for energy resilience within our communities in the face of the various impacts of climate change. It's about building leadership in our low-income communities and communities of color. So it has very many ways that our communities approach and take on this struggle. But overall, just to characterize it, it is a struggle to create our own energy systems, to restore the earth, to drive sustainable economic life, and to advance social empowerment. So it's crucial to the fight for climate justice, racial justice, and economic justice. And these are the fights that are happening, in our streets and at the legislatures and at public board meetings and social media, in our prisons and classrooms and at the polls when we go to elect folks. Basically, energy democracy is our call for clean power to the people. Our lives, and our futures really depend on it. So that's sort of the way in which we look at energy democracy. And I want to turn it back over to Crystal, who will talk a little bit more about how the Energy Democracy Project then fits within this broader struggle.
And to that, I would like to first invite you all to watch a video that captured the inaugural meetings of the Energy Democracy Project happened in Detroit a year ago.
I feel very hopeful and honored to be here connecting with individuals all across the nation that have been doing phenomenal work pushing the envelope around energy democracy.
Energy democracy is not only the ability, but the necessity to determine the use of energy, which is a microcosm of a community determining their own destiny.
Energy democracy for people of color really is about empowerment, understanding how deeply we've been disempowered.
Energy system, as it currently stands, is very destructive to the lives and possibilities of people of color.
Energy democracy is really about the ultimate vision of really what we're trying to get to. The way that we're able to not just talk about the energy system, but the environmental injustice, racial injustice, social injustice that is wrapped up in all of those systems.
People of all ages have come together in this room, from as close as around the corner to as far away as Alaska. We must educate the people. We must pressure the government to do the right thing to make it better for all of our children.
At its core, in the fabric of the DNA of energy democracy, it is people having power.
So since the convening last year, we have been coming together and building common resources that support our collective work. I can walk you through the origin of this project. 37 of organizations from 22 states, including Alaska, Puerto Rico, Louisiana, Minnesota, Kentucky, Massachusetts, came together from this strategic convening on energy democracy. It was a collaborative effort done by 20 organizations organizing the agenda logistics. In Detroit, our goal was to, one, understand at a deeper level the energy democracy work that participating organizations are doing. Two, see the common challenges and opportunity. And three, share expertise and knowledge about how to advance that work. And since then, more than 30 organizations are moving and working together as affiliated organizations to the project. We agreed to come back together again. And the outcome of this was a unique collaboration with the Values and Purpose Committee that helps guide the tension around political philosophy in our work, national alignment process that increases communication and coordination in the emerging energy democracy movement across different formations. There are 8 anchor organizations who hold the collaborative initiative of the projects. Collectively, we develop common strategies, share resources, and advocate for positions on national energy issues by coming together in working committees. Initiatives we have started working are Resource Hub, People's Utility Justice Playbook, and recurring meetings. Our efforts will increase the visibility of energy democracy as a way to define a new energy paradigm that Al talked about and pursue the transition to alternative energy solutions as part of the broader transition and transformation of society. The project's goal will be accomplished by cultivating innovative challenges and learning between affiliated organizations through information sharing and trust-building collaboration. And the Energy Democracy Project really represents a unique collaboration amongst its affiliated organizations, which advocates for community-based, solutions-focused, and frontline-led and justice-centered renewable energy effort. So now let's hear from some of them about the energy problems our communities face and the solutions we came up with. I will hand it over to Chandra and Yesenia to talk about utility burdens.
Thanks so much, Crystal. Thanks to all the funders that have joined us today and to this team for putting this together. Again, I'm Chandra Farley with Partnership for Southern Equity. We are a racial equity organization based in Atlanta, working at the intersection of racial equity and energy and climate, health, economy, and land use and housing. And I lead our Just Energy work, which is focused on racial equity and energy, utilities, and climate. Taking control of our energy choices really starts with what we have set up today, democratizing access to the energy planning and decision-making process. In order to create the conditions for this future of energy democracy, we have to have a strong, informed, ready to lead community leaders and communities who are well versed in these issues of energy and utilities, which, you know, if we're all being honest, a lot of us don't really think about in our daily lives unless we are doing this work. So being able to talk to communities about, fortunately, unfortunately, here in Georgia, we have an elected public service commission. And the ability to be able to make the connection between civic engagement and our democratic processes and utility bills has been critical to building out this movement for just energy and energy democracy in the investor-owned utility space, as well as the electric membership cooperative space, which is where a lot of our work around energy democracy was born and continues to grow. A lot of folks don't know if they, are a part of an electric membership cooperative, that they are not just customers. They own their utility. They are member owners. They have the right to know when their board meetings are. They have a right to run for the board. They have a right to influence the economic and community development decisions that electric membership cooperatives wield great influence and power over, particularly in rural areas across the country, and particularly in the South. It's a harder space sometimes with, monopoly utilities, investor-owned utilities, but that is critical as well. And I do think, the opportunity that some have to be able to say to communities, you can go right here down the street and there are these 5 people who are making decisions every single day that impact where your energy comes from and how much you pay for it. So if we're having a community meeting or a conversation, people get perked up. And so that has translated into mobilizing actions to push back on rate hikes, to advocate for more, not just more clean energy, but also things like energy efficiency, particularly in states or municipalities that just have the real regulatory and legislative barriers not quite yet to be able to move certain clean energy possibilities ahead. So the last few months, I think, have shown, I think we all know, have shown a really big, bright, flashing light on the importance of energy and access to utilities in particular. The rate of shutoffs that has been going on across the country, the rate of disconnections, even when some voluntary moratoriums have claimed to protect their customers for a period of time. We know there were people who were shut off before March who were never reconnected. So we have been able to we Partnership for Southern Equity, many of us here as a part of the Energy Democracy Project have been able to coordinate and lead a national effort to call for a national moratorium on utility shutoffs in order to protect power, electricity, water, and broadband for communities that we know need it the most, particularly the essential workers who are marginalized by low wages. So lots of challenges, but also lots of great opportunities with some of the solutions that we're going to talk about today.
Thank you, Chandra, for setting up the context on utility burdens. I appreciate that. I'm Yesenia Rivera from Solar United Neighbors, and I am the co-anchor of the People's Utility Justice Playbook Committee. And I will talk about how we plan to overcome this particular challenge. This playbook came to be because we have seen activists across the country fighting some of the same fights, sometimes literally from the same playbook or same legislation cooked up by utility industry groups like the Edison Electric Institute. This People's Utility Playbook is an attempt to connect those fights, identify our own strategies and tactics so that we're in a position for success and that we can learn from the experiences of our allies across the country. We are in the process of collecting stories from the field of people that are already fighting their utilities in pursuit of energy democracy, utility justice. To date, we have done over 20 interviews, and these interviews, in addition with the knowledge base of the group that's writing the playbook, will help create a product that is based on the reality of what is happening on the ground. It's like this playbook is made by grassroots organizations who are seeing real winning strategies, and it's made for other grassroots organizations so they can learn from those strategies and go on to win their own campaigns. We plan for this to be a straightforward, easy to use playbook, not filled with jargon or inaccessible language, so that people can feel empowered with the knowledge and strategies they need to fight their utilities. However, a resource like this playbook can only be as useful as the people's ability to have access to them. Therefore, Jessica and Ernesto will share with you the energy problem around access to information and resources. So I'll hand it over to Jessica. Thank you.
Thank you, Yesenia. I'm Jessica Tovar. I'm with the local Clean Energy Alliance. I'm an energy democracy organizer. One thing that I want to just really emphasize and also ask everyone And if your video is off, you can use your thumbs up. But I'm curious for folks here on this call, who's ever experienced a shut off based on inability to pay your utility bills. Raise your hand or give a thumbs up if that's something that you have experienced. Okay, yeah. So a lot of us are very familiar with the culture of the corporation, right? And I really feel deeply like, that my relationship to energy has always been a revolving debt. And if you can't pay that debt, your power goes out. There's really no mercy when it comes to not being able to make ends meet, right? And on top of that, I'm somebody who grew up by 5 gas-fired power plants, transformers, and I've constantly had headaches and other effects that were, I know deeply that they were related to, the environment that I grew up in, which was a lot of industry and a lot of industrial transmission wires in my community, right? So for me, it's very important to emphasize that, that's been the be all end all of our relationship to energy. Like, these decisions have been made for us. That infrastructure has been set in place and has been definitely, the worst of it is in communities of color and in the poorest communities. I grew up in housing projects, and so I didn't have a choice, right? So one of the things I just really want to emphasize is that, it's important for us to be involved into really restructuring the system, because if I had my 2 cents in it, it would look very different. And there would not be any power shutoffs, right? We would not be leaving people literally in the dark. And just to emphasize, myself, I require power to live. I have a chronic illness. I cannot afford to be without electricity. That is how I get around and, have to use like a breathing machine at night. And so it's very important for me. So one of the things I want to emphasize is, my experience has been, I had to learn about the energy system. This is a whole foreign language that we have to learn in order to crack that egg and get in there and change the system. And one of the things that we've really emphasized is that, for somebody like me, if somebody were to hand me a toolkit and say, hey, go for it, organize and change the system, that doesn't work. We need human interaction and a network, which is why we've established this group of people to be able to change the system into what we need it to be. And so that works for our people and it doesn't leave us in the dark, right? And so the same with the proposal, right? The solution in our communities is that we had to learn what that looks like. And get that technical assistance. And that's all very difficult to acquire. And so, a lot of us, I will speak for Local Clean Energy Alliance, a small group of people working on a shoestring budget. Well, we have to get this information. We have to get it to the community in order to democratize energy. We have been disempowered and left in the dark in more ways than one, so that we cannot interact and advocate to change the system. So, I just want to uplift that everybody on this call right now has been empowered to change the system and is working very hard to bring clean power to the people, because that's the only way we're going to get the jobs and the health and have a system that doesn't leave communities, families, the poorest people in the dark. So with that, I'll just say clean power to the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Hi, everyone. My name is Ernesto Cruz, and I'm with Co-op Power in Massachusetts. And we're a series of different community energy cooperatives, 7 of them that are decentralized in the Northeast region. And I am also the co-anchor with Al Weinrub for the Resource Hub Committee. And the Resource Hub is a connector between affiliated organizations who need or provide the skills and resources to promote energy democracy. And what we've just heard is that there's a serious ease of access issue relative to getting the information for energy democracy. So though there are many toolkits, resource libraries, online folders, websites, videos, and more, there's no one dedicated place to making sure that all the right information is in the right place, and then connecting people to those resources and bodies of knowledge. And so the Resource Hub would be a service provided by staff available to help communities and local organizations attempting to do energy democracy work to find those informational resources, skills, partners, and organizations they need to get their projects and campaigns across the finish line. And then this model would serve to support and strengthen the emerging energy democracy movement by representing and promoting the shared values, strategies, political perspectives, and work of the organizations that make up the Energy Democracy Project. But to build power, we need to strategically connect our work together. And Colette and Russell are going to share with you the problems behind the disconnected work in a time of movement.
Thank you so much, Ernesto, and thank you, Jessica. Peace, everyone. It's so great to see so many familiar faces on the phone. I work on the committee with Russell to really talk about strategic gatherings, but to really understand why there is a committee around strategic gatherings requires us to acknowledge that climate change is a reality for many of our communities right now. In the Gulf Coast, we're watching another storm, and the scientists are telling us that the waters off the Atlantic coast and the Caribbean have never been so warm. This means a very difficult storm season for us in this region. We also know that communities in the Delta, in the northern part of Louisiana, the northern part of Mississippi, that these communities are experiencing torrential downpours that are affecting planting and agriculture. They're affecting the catfish farms, they're affecting all of the economic drivers in these spaces. And so the climate reality is not just the storms coming off the coast, it's what the rain events that are happening in the interior and the heat waves that we're also experiencing. We also know that our communities on the West Coast are dealing with drought-induced wildfires and a lack of rainfall and a lack of water, while our friends on the East Coast are getting ready to understand what it is to live with hurricanes every year as the storms go higher and the season lasts longer. This is our reality now, and the climate reality is absolutely connected to a new energy future. For those of us who are paying attention, climate advocates, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change gives us now, we're at 10 years to make a drastic change, to save our planet, really. And if we don't figure this out, if we don't figure out how to drastically reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, our planet is in trouble to the point of questioning our own ability to exist. We have very little time to innovate and scale up our climate solutions and transform our energy system, but those things must be a key part to this global strategy. The good news is that it's time to link and scale up the work. And this is what we're missing in the movement right now. There's a lot of great work happening on the ground. There are folks doing amazing things. We've just heard some of the products so far coming out of this formation. But there's a challenge here, and it's time. And time is going to require us to scale up. We scale up by coming together, and we have to figure out how to bring the people with the great ideas together. The good work needs to be linked up in order to scale up. If there are answers that don't exist yet, we need to put the best minds together to innovate based on experience, best practices, and information. And we're just at the cusp of getting together. We just saw a great video and a great meeting that we had in Detroit, but this is just the beginning of practitioners around energy democracy coming together. And finally, I'll just mention that this COVID pandemic has had a terrible hit on communities and has catalyzed the movement around energy. we see that when we're talking about shutoffs and moratoriums, folks are actually asking the question that Jessica just talked about, like, how do we control our own energy? Why are we at the mercy of these utility companies? This has to be part of the conversation, even around this crisis. Energy democracy has a valuable role to play. And to be impactful and to go to scale, we're going to need to coordinate our efforts. I want to turn it over to Russell to talk about what coordination could look like and how we can come together. Russell?
Thank you, Colette, for presenting those very critical challenges to the planet and to people and communities across the nation. My name is Russell Hicks, in conjunction with POWER, which is Philadelphia Organized to Witness, Empower, and Rebuild, as well as Centennial Parkside Community Development Corporation in the East Parkside neighborhood of West Philadelphia. I'm very thankful to my co-anchor with the Strategic Recurring Gatherings, Colette, who hosted the Energy Democracy Project Anchors in New Orleans right before the pandemic hit this past late January and early February. So I'm here to present some of the solutions and how the Energy Democracy Project plans to overcome some of these challenges. And recurring gatherings, 3 solutions in regards to how we plan to overcome these challenges. There will be future recurring gatherings providing a space for sharing relevant data, committee progress reports, and frameworks for affiliate organizations to advance the broader vision of energy democracy across the United States. The gatherings also serve as a trusted space for sharing and learning, accessing critical resources, training staff, and to plan collective actions to advance energy democracy. And third, the annual gathering agenda is designed to democratize information, create accessible processes to present and create data-driven policy recommendations, measure goals, and to capture feedback. So we are very blessed to gather with our affiliate organizations in Detroit. But I invite you, as we're planning an online strategic convening this November 20th through the 22nd, 2020. So we invite you to support and get involved. Now that you've heard a lot about our collective work, we would love to hear from you. I would like to turn it back over to Crystal to help facilitate questions that you might have. Crystal?
Thank you, Russell. So please use your hand raise function to share your feedback or question, or you can just raise your hand with your video. Let me change the view so we can see everyone. We'll take some time for questions and maybe answer from the chat for about 10-15 minutes. So if there's any questions or feedback, we'd love to hear from you. We talked a lot. Go ahead, Allison.
I was trying to find my hand raise function, but I couldn't do it fast enough. So I was just like, stack, I don't know. Hey y'all, thank you so much for hosting this and for everything that you've shared, and so powerful. It's actually like beyond comprehension that y'all can fit in everything that you've been holding and doing in just like a short, you know, Zoom call. Like, so just thank you for everything. Appreciate y'all. I just have a question, which is sort of about trying to understand how to best support y'all in this work, as I'm sure many things have changed as things have moved kind of into kind of like virtual space. I'm wondering if anyone has anything to share about like how we as funders can support you or learn from you about what like digital and like virtual organizing like has done for the work, like either for the like the good, the bad, the ugly, or sort of what's going on for folks around that, if that's a useful thing to share. If not, totally skip it, but that's my question.
Jessica?
I'm happy to share a little bit.
Go ahead.
On the infrastructure side, you know, Partnership for Southern Equity being, you know, and all of us doing work centered on the ground. our organizers had actually had some pretty intensive digital organizing training last year, but we didn't have the staff capacity really to support all of the digital infrastructure that is really needed to manage those tools, follow up on those tools, create the messaging. So I think we felt in a good place, you know, as organizing, being relational, working on relationships. We had a lot of good relationships in place that we were able to shift less about the work messaging, but, you know, do you need groceries? Do you need somebody to go pick up your prescriptions? Just really being able to make those one-to-one phone calls. So I just know for us, from our perspective, the tools were there, but the infrastructure, the capacity is still missing, and critical is going to be critical for us, and I'm sure, you know, a lot of our partner organizations, to be able to leverage those tools to maximum capacity. And we had to face that there were just some folks that we weren't going to be able to reach. You know, the digital divide is real. So still getting creative and trying to be safe about trying to, you know, still be back in community with people.
Yeah, I just wanted to add also to, like, for me personally, like, I never had training on a lot of these tools, and like Zoom, hosting a meeting on Zoom was something I had not done before until the pandemic hit, and I still don't know it well. Like, I'm amazed at what Crystal can do with like a survey and all these things. Like, when I host meetings on Zoom, I ask people to raise their hand because I don't know how to use the tool, but also yeah, I think we need more support with that kind of thing, because, you know, I'm sure everybody's in the same boat where we have to learn by trial and error to use these things. And then, like, we have like a low budget Zoom, $14.99. Like, you have to pay for these things to have the other features. So yes, I personally can benefit from actual training.
This is Colette. Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Russell.
No, I just like to add, we do gather for learning with our anchors and affiliate organizations on a quarterly basis through Zoom calls. But yes, go ahead, my co-anchor Colette.
Yeah, no, that's what I was going to say. I was going to say, I think the project has been able to really sort of hone in on not what one individual organization needs. I think what we just heard from Jessica is we could hear that a million times across the network. But the work has been to how do we pull in trainings within this project so that everybody can walk away and do their work better. Not because we're all doing the same exact work, but because we're all working at community level and we need to figure out some of these things. So I think in addition to the trainings for each organization, or the support for each organization, I think the project, the Energy Democracy Project, is trying to figure out how can we develop trainings for our ecosystem that can then hit far and wide a lot quicker. So just echoing Russell's point about the trainings that we know we now need to do as part of the Energy Democracy Project.
And speaking of our diverse work, Diane has a great question. Diane, would you like to unmute yourself and share that verbally?
Sure. Thanks, everyone. This is really a great presentation. I appreciate it. I just had a question about fighting back and fighting forward. And, you know, I understand that you have significant kind of energy-related challenges, stopping shutoffs and things based on everything that's happening with COVID and the economic crisis. But I'm curious how you're balancing the fighting back and fighting forward, and where you're seeing opportunities to work with communities to build new energy systems. And I really don't mean for it to be an either or, so I wasn't quite sure how to ask that in a more kind of circular way.
Thank you. Yesenia, would you like to go?
Yeah, we're actually doing both. We have organized as a coalition to put out utility moratoriums on the shutoffs, and organize our own communities to fight back on these shutoffs. Because as you've heard in this call, a lot of people are suffering. COVID has decimated our workforce, especially amongst communities of color. We are struggling the most when it comes to these shutoffs. So that is definitely something that we pivoted to answer because it was vital to energy democracy and to the fight going forward, but we're still working on building a new system. That's sort of where the playbook comes in, is like we need to fight back so that we can start taking control and creating more democratic system. There's a system in place already. The question is, are we going to replace it with something that's just unequitable as well? And that's where we want to come in and help people fight back to get control and build a new system.
And Al or Ernesto, would you like to add some?
Well, I think just to say thank you for the question, Diane. We're always having to fight back. I mean, that's the given. It's the fighting forward that really distinguishes the Energy Democracy Project in the sense of trying to create new institutions and new structures moving forward. So it's sort of like a little pain in the ass that we always have to be fighting against the crap that's coming down. But I think most of the initiatives that our communities are involved in really have a very more forward looking view. Without solutions, the fight back is always limited. And so the playbook and some of the work that's going on to challenge the utilities, plus the work that's going on to organize our communities into co-ops and to trying to create our own neighborhood-based and more locally controlled energy systems is an extremely important part in moving to the future. So I think what that is it. It's like that dynamic is always there. I think the project is generally more focused on the future, but we have to fight these rearguard battles all along.
So actually, I can actually jump in on the question you just asked, as well as Diane's question. And thank you very much, everyone, for taking the time to come here with us. The Energy Democracy Alliance has been focused on both all along, largely on fighting infrastructure, pipelines, and the like, even as we're working to build a clean energy future in New York that is renewable, equitable, accountable, and local. And as COVID has impacted our work, there's sort of two directions additionally, on top of all that people have been going in. One is joining together with a variety of groups, including the DSA, housing groups, and so forth, both on ending evictions and also shutoffs. And we don't have an initiative that is overarching for the EDA, but a great many of our members are doing mutual aid and support according to their abilities. Larger groups are able to deliver food and do a lot of work out on the streets, whereas smaller organizations like my own, we tend to try to strategically insert ourselves into initiatives like addressing the digital divide and improving communications from government to communities.
See a question about mutual aid from Felice. Would you like to share that question real quick? It looks like she's frozen, but the question here is, what are the possibilities of collaborating with the many mutual aid groups that have popped up? Since Adam's sort of addressing this, Colette, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I appreciate this question. And for me, it also connects, as Adam said, to Diane's question. You know, our work around renewable energy in the Gulf Coast has been forward-looking, but it was after a devastating impact, and how long people had to go without energy, without electricity after a climate disaster, and how long it takes the grid to get back up, and who the utilities prioritize getting electricity to, which is a racialized decision. And so for us, this conversation around energy democracy has never started with green jobs or greening or even greening the infrastructure. It's all been about our independence, our ability to survive what we know is coming more and more. This is a conversation we have around solar and wind. We don't get to talk about this as a job creation situation. That's not what is the most compelling. For us, we've been through these long moments with no energy. And for us, this is a resistance issue. This is about community survival. This is about how we have our own independence. And so the mutual aid work for us actually started in 2005. The history of mutual aid is long. The actual definition of it is not understood by many people who use the words. And it is rooted in a political understanding and a political stance. So to work with mutual aid, I love this question, because there's a piece of mutual aid that is about shifting and transforming your political reality, not just giving people what they need in the moment, but shifting your political reality. And your political reality can shift, as Jessica was saying, when you shift your relationship to the power structure. Who is controlling whether or not you have your lights on? Who is controlling whether or not you can plug up your machine, which, by the way, post-Katrina, we had a lot of folks who just couldn't get to medicines and machinery because we had no electricity. So this for us is about survival. It is about independence. It is about resistance. And for us, the ancillary pieces are job creation and green infrastructure, right? But the real piece here is our lives are at stake. And we see that if we can engage ourselves in not just an energy system that is, as was mentioned earlier, just a transference of a monopoly from one group to the other, that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for a new relationship to our energy system. And we're looking for our own community control of that system. And this project helps for all of us to develop our political reality, our political understanding of the practical work we're doing and how it fits into a broader political scheme.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Jessica, would you like to add more?
You know, I think that is a really good question. Certainly one of the things that we've really been, focusing on is having relationships with folks. Obviously, the mutual aid is the immediate need, right? That comes from the ground up. And we've been reaching out to partners to see how we can, support each other. And then the other thing is we really want to, advocate for more investments in resiliency for our communities, resiliency hubs, resiliency projects like microgrids, and ways to keep the power on in the event of crisis. And one of the things I've been saying is, how are we supposed to be sheltering in place when our power could be going off, when we could be evicted, when all these things, are all these injustices are amplified, during a crisis. And so it's really important for us to advocate for more investment in our communities. A lot of these projects are happening, but they're not happening for us. And we need to be there at the table to push, the powers to put these investments in our communities, because, there really is a lot of clean energy elitism, right? And that's not gonna save us. It's not gonna save our communities. As a matter of fact, it's literally gonna leave us out in the dark. And if we didn't have energy, I think about, we couldn't even have our communications, like this Zoom conversation, our cell phones and things like that. So, this is a very important topic. Being able to respond to emergency immediately. I had to make my own air filter with a fan, because we have been inundated with smoke. Yeah, Shiva's seen my fan. Because we've been inundated with wildfire here in California, and that is going to aggravate existing or create health problems. So and in the context of COVID being it, people are dying of respiratory issue. I'm really concerned about this time that we're entering fire season, in the middle of a pandemic, when a lot of these respirator masks and things are not accessible. So this is a really scary time, but I really want us to use this moment to push our solutions and get that for our communities.
Yeah, thank you for that great question and comments. Do we have any other reactions, questions? We'll wrap up the Q&A session in about 5 minutes and then go into what Allison's referring to, resourcing and funding needs to invite you all to join us. But we'd love to just continue this conversation here. If there's any thoughts, we'd love to hear your reaction, definitely.
Crystal, I'm curious for the funders on the call, since, you know, everyone's shy. I'm curious, you know, how funders are thinking about energy democracy. What does this even mean in that philanthropic sector? Is it even there? Is it even talked about? Like, where is this topic? How is it being talked about? How is it being approached in the philanthropic sector? That was to any of the funders.
We know that many of the funders are here because you are already funding at least one of our affiliated organizations. So feel free to share like what that relationship is and where you're getting into and hoping for in the future, especially hearing what you thought reaction from this call. If not, Allison, go ahead.
I just feel like I'm talking a lot. I'll say a short thing because I think it's the right question. It's a big juicy question, and I only know what I know, which is like a little bit. So I can't speak for the whole sector. The challenge that I myself have encountered in these conversations is that energy is like in the funding space, I think still seen as like this technocratic type of solution, and not so connected to like people's lives. And definitely not in a conversation, I think for the most part that I've been in, that's about racial justice or racial equity, or about the disproportionate impacts, you know, of like what it means that we don't live in a democracy, right? And then like what that means for the energy system, and then who that is actually not just burdening, but actually killing, and like all the things that y'all are talking about. Typically, I find myself in a conversation where if energy is brought up, I would say where it's brought up, it's usually in a conversation that's about emissions reduction or a technical kind of approach to climate change. It's less about systems change, if that makes sense. That's been my experience.
I think Allison is right. Philanthropy is not monolithic, and it's all over the map. Particularly as it relates to climate, I can speak on the issue of transportation because we've been working a little bit on that, trying to bring in transit democracy, transit equity, because many climate funders are obsessed with electric vehicles to the exclusion of everything else. And we say, where is the equity on electric vehicles? Well, we'll give people subsidies to buy more electric vehicles. It's like, that's how it works. So in the transit space, we've started up a fund to try to help grassroots organizations argue for what they need. So I think, and the reason that electric vehicles are attractive to many climate funders is because it's grid related, right? They're engineers. Many of them are engineers that have a background in the grid, in this kind of bloodless numerical standard, as opposed to, no, people don't have enough energy. People have no democracy. There is no people supporting, you know, community choice aggregation per se. And so I think that's the problem that you have. I know Allison's been trying to open up the climate and energy funders to a wider set of things. And I look forward to joining her on that board and also help opening up thinking.
Thank you. Well, if there's nothing else, we can move on to the next part to start wrapping up. And so as to Allison's question, what the resources and the funding needs that we have here to just us coming together and thinking about what we need in order to create that infrastructure to support all of our work in our own communities. Our fundraising goal for the next 18 months is $800,000. We're grateful to Sparkplug Foundation for really helping us kickstart this process already. And if you're ready to fund this work, we have a fiscal agent, social and environmental entrepreneurs, set up to receive 501c3 donations on behalf of the Energy Democracy Project. And if you'd like more information or have more feedback to help us become stronger, please feel free to contact me directly or reach out to your grantees who's part of this formation, invited you to be here to work out a time to talk with several members working on any of the projects you hear about today, and perhaps some still in development. And I really look forward to following up a conversation with you. You can contact me. We'll keep you posted on the great work of this formation, offering ways for you to plug in as we all develop our knowledge around this work. And thank you for those who've already invested in our work, including Serna, Race Forward, and Kresge, Lush Foundation, Earth Justice, and Sparkplug Foundation. Really big gratitude for those who also will invest in the future. And thank you all so much for your time, for sharing your insights and listening. You will be receiving a